Hi guys! Today, I'm addressing this post by Sanctuary, which is a popular astrology app. They recently made a statement saying the only accurate horoscope is the one written for your rising sign. Now, I'm sure many of you guys read horoscopes for your sun sign, and I feel like this can be confusing because people don't understand how horoscopes are written in general. So today, I want to clear things up. Now, this is not to bash Sanctuary in any way. I actually love their app and I recommend it all the time, but I'm also speaking out today because I used to believe in this statement too until I learned more. So today, I'm sharing with you what I know. So first of all, what are they even talking about? Like, why does the rising sign matter in terms of your horoscope? To answer this question, let's back up a bit. You guys know when I'm forecasting for you, I tell you the exact degree of a planetary event so that you can see on your chart which house they fall into. For example, last week I was talking a lot about the new moon and how it was in 25 degrees of Virgo. And I was telling you guys how that degree falls in my 7th house of relationships. So with that, I know relationships are going to be a big focus for me next month. That's exactly how we do forecasting. The houses are the most critical part because they tell you the specific area of life where things will happen. This is exactly how I forecast for all my clients. I look at which houses the planets are passing through on their chart. Now, the placement of the houses on your chart is actually determined by your rising sign. That's why it's so important. This is actually a little tool I use to write horoscopes. Now, what I mean by the placement of the houses is that, some people seem to have Cancer in the first house, or they might have Gemini, or they might have Taurus. It almost seems to be random and like differ person by person, but actually this placement of the houses in relation to the zodiac signs is determined by your rising sign. Your rising sign is not a planet or an asteroid. It is actually this specific line that starts the first house. So I want everyone to go look at your chart right now because you'll see the sign that is at the tail end of this line that starts the first house is going to be your rising sign. In technical terms, your rising sign is the sign that was rising on the eastern horizon at the time of your birth. And you can even see that reflected on your birth chart here because you see how the first house always starts right here on the left hand of the chart, in the middle of the chart, because this line is representing the eastern horizon. Your rising sign is highly dependent on your time of birth, and based on it, the rest of the houses follow. For example, my rising sign is basically here at 28 degrees of Aquarius, and so my chart looks basically like this. Now, when astrologers write horoscopes, again, they want to talk about where the planets are in your houses, like how the new moon was in my 7th house last week, or how Mars retrograde is in my 2nd house right now. But the problem is, astrologers don't know exactly where to put the houses because they don't know your specific birth chart. And so in order to cater to everyone, they basically do something like this, where they will put the first house at 0 degrees of a sign. So in this example, the first house starts and ends in Aquarius, the second house starts and ends in Pisces, so on and so forth. And this is still fairly accurate to my own chart. Now with this, astrologers can then say, Uranus has been in Taurus all year, and so it's been shaking up my 4th house of home and family. Or Saturn's been Capricorn all year, so it's been teaching me lessons about spirituality with the 12th house. The problem with this is that people don't usually know their rising sign, or at least they didn't in the past when astrology was not popular. So that's why they created the concept of a sun sign horoscope, where they encourage you to read it for your sun sign. This here is an example from my local newspaper where they still write it like this. And they have like the dates for each of the signs. Astrologers write this using a method called solar houses, which is where they pretend that your sun sign is your rising sign. So for example, if I was going to write this for my sun sign, which is Taurus, I would do something like this, where I sort of move the first house all the way into Taurus and pretend that the first house starts at 0 degrees of Taurus. Now you can see if I were to read a horoscope that was written based on this chart, it would actually not be accurate to my own personal birth chart because my rising does not begin in Taurus. That's why Sanctuary says the only accurate horoscope is the one written for your rising sign. But the thing is, horoscopes written for your sun sign using the solar houses can actually be very useful and even accurate. Solar houses are an ancient method developed by the Greeks, and they've been used for hundreds of years. And really, it does make sense to place the sun in the first house because both represent your identity and sense of self. So if a planet is activating your sun, it's a similar experience to that planet activating your first house. For example, Uranus has been in Taurus all year. And so if I were to read a horoscope for Taurus, they might say that I'm experiencing a change in my identity because they would assume Uranus is going through the first house. Well, actually, Uranus is going through my third house on my real chart, so that doesn't really fit. But while Uranus is doing that, it is also going to be aligning with my sun in Taurus, which when Uranus aligns with the sun, that's essentially saying I'm experiencing a change in my identity, the same meaning as if it was passing through my first house. So solar houses can be very useful because it tells you how other planets are influencing your sun, the most important planet on your birth chart. And I'm also taking a forecasting class from the London School of Astrology, and they also teach that solar houses are a valid way to forecast, and they're especially useful if you don't know your time of birth, because to know the rising sign, you do need to know your exact time of birth. You can think about it this way. Horoscopes written for your rising sign are better matched to the houses on your chart, and so they will tell you the actual events that are taking place in your life, the things that you're consciously aware of and consciously doing. But horoscopes written for your sun sign are good indicators of the underlying events or changes that are taking place within yourself, even if you're not consciously aware of it. For example, Saturn has been in my actual 11th house all year, so it's been challenging me to step up for my community in a bigger way, which I've been doing consciously through, creating this astrology business. But for my sun sign, Saturn has been in my 9th house all year, so it's been challenging me to, take risks and get out of my comfort zone. I haven't been consciously doing that, but I realize that is the underlying subtext of everything I've been doing this year. My gripe with Sanctuary and all this is that they said the only accurate horoscope is the one written for your rising sign. To me, there are, many different methods with varying levels of accuracy, and they can all still be very useful. The most accurate version will, of course, be the one written for your personal birth chart by a professional astrologer. Then the second most accurate would be the one for your rising sign, just because it matches your houses better technically, but even then, there are limitations. For example, if I were to read a horoscope written for Aquarius, because that's my rising sign, it would say Uranus is in my 4th house because it's in Taurus this year. But like I mentioned, it's actually in my 3rd house because I was born at a later degree of Aquarius, so it's right about here. There are just natural limitations to general horoscopes because it's impossible to make it fit for every sign. And so that's why I'm starting to move away from them in general and just give you guys a degree so you can look at your own chart. The final thing I'll say with all this is that astrology is not a science and it should not be treated as such, as if there's a right answer and a wrong answer. To me, astrology is an intuitive art, and we should all just practice the systems and methods that feel the most healing to us because it's helping us listen to our intuition better or to trust our intuition better. As long as you're experiencing those things in your astrology practice, you know you're on the right track.